Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
It's right there. It's right there. Luke Skywalker's wearing white. Darth Vader's wearing black. It's the old cowboys, good versus evil.
Hello there, this is Alora, and I'm a prequel trilogy kid.
And this is Dave, and I'm an original trilogy kid. Welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You? The show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars to take the hate out of the debate and look at the franchise from a certain point of view, one fan at a time.
Yeah, our guest this week, tell him, Dave, who do we got?
Yes, we have Christopher Giroux. He's a movie producer who has produced films in every genre, sci-fi, horror, but most recently, and most fun, holiday romantic comedies for networks such as Hallmark Channel and Lifetime.
Yeah, his take on the holiday rom-com and just like fandom in general is very fun, very sweet. This is actually one of my favorite interviews of the season. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Yeah, so let's go to him.
Sounds good.
Should I say it?
Yeah, you like to say it.
Luke, we're gonna have company! But being Canadian, I'm not exactly sure if there's a tariff on this or if we should be enemies.
I hope not.
I'm just hoping you're not going to yell elbows up and like attack us virtually.
No, nothing but friendly Canadians.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. Tell us, Chris, are you ready to share with the world what does Star Wars mean to you?
I'm beyond ready. I feel like I've been sharing it without people have been asking for the last 30 years. But now I'm happy to be, talking about what Star Wars means to me when someone has actually asked versus just bombarding people on the subway with Star Wars knowledge, So.
And there'll be a historical record in perpetuity. I love it.
Of course.
Yes.
So we love to kick off here with our 5 with the Force, and it's kind of, we call it semi-rapid fire, because we don't want you to feel like you can't elaborate if you want to. But just to get the Star Wars baseline. Yeah. So which movie is your guilty pleasure?
I would say my guilty pleasure in the Star Wars franchise would be Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I was just watching that one the other day.
I love it.
The Ewoks.
I love the Ewoks, and I just love how it all comes together. It's fun.
Dave, do you have a D6?
Oh, yes.
What'd you get?
3.
Oh, he got a 3. Okay. Who is your favorite bounty hunter?
Wow. I think I just have to go classic Boba Fett, I think that just because of the lore. And I went to Industrial Light and Magic and I saw the suit, the real suit in person. So I gotta go with Boba Fett.
I love that. I actually feel like a lot of times people try to I think they overlook the main characters the bigger ones as being sometimes the best because they want to prove the deepness of their fandom.
Course.
You know what I mean? So I love that answer. Do you have a favorite line to quote?
A favorite line to quote? I think that I literally use "May the Force be with you" constantly. I think I make a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies as a profession, and so I find myself saying "Merry Christmas in July." So I think the classic, but also during my wife's wedding, I kept joking. During my wife and I's wedding, I kept joking that when she says "I love you," I was just going to be like, I can just say "I know," right? I can just say that in front of all of our family. She's like, "No, you have to say it back. You got to say it back." And so I would go with "May the Force be with you," but also the little interaction with Han and Leia and Empire Strikes Back makes its way into conversation quite often.
I love that. Besides the films, what's your favorite Star Wars content to engage with?
Yeah, big Mandalorian fan, I think specifically during the pandemic, because in Canada, due to the time zone, the episodes would drop at between 4 and 6 in the morning. And during not at different times on the West Coast, but we would get them on the East Coast at I guess it's midnight for the West Coast, but it would be 3, 4 a.m. due to the time zone for us.
Yeah.
So we would, during the pandemic, not a lot to do. So we would set our alarm and we would get up at 4:00 in the morning and we would watch it as it premiered. So my wife and I would have a weekly routine of and then going back to bed for a couple hours before going to work. But we would wake up at 4 and watch it and make coffee. And, so we watched Mandalorian season 2 and 3 like that by setting our timers. And often we're on night shoots with the movie. So sometimes we would get home at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We would kind of unwind. We'd watch the episode and then go to bed. But we would always watch it as it dropped. We wouldn't watch it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day.
Yeah.
So we did some of that with some of the Marvel shows too. So I would say Mandalorian just because that was a fun experience, keeping it kind of fun during the pandemic.
That's such a cool. I love hearing people's pandemic stories because I feel like it was kind of like that time where it's like when you're in an airport and it's like the time doesn't exist. Like it's
you're like in an airport. We kind of joke that it's like Hotel California. Like you can check out, but you can never leave.
Okay, our last of the 5 with the Force. If they were making movies inside the Star Wars universe, out of all the existing Star Wars characters, which 2 characters would you cast in a rom-com?
Oh, wow. What an excellent question. That's a big one. In a rom-com. Wow. That's a lot of pressure. I make a lot of pressure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the low-hanging fruit is obviously, Han and Leia, just because there is that will they, won't they? And I think in the the Hallmark world, we do have a lot of that will they, won't they? And of course, spoiler, they will. And I think that that type of energy is fun. I think that their romance, I think, was very uniquely portrayed in the original trilogy. Because it wasn't as straight line as I think most romantic stories are. I think they kind of had to find their way, and I think I relate to that a lot with not only my own personal relationships, but just the movies that I make. Is that at the end we kind of know there's going to be somewhat of a happy ending, but we want to go on that adventure. And I think that with the TV movies and Hallmark Christmas movies, like we know they're going to get together in the end, but we want to see them build the ice castle and we want to see them go skating. We want to see the all is lost moment where their relationship's ripped apart and they have to come back together at the end. So I think it'd be fun to see the years in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens of where, Han and Leia doing laundry, and in their lives, going grocery shopping or drinking blue milk or whatever their lives would be. So I would pick those 2.
I love that. I would watch that.
Would you ever pitch Hallmark is really good at having kind of genre-based movies in the sense of that they have like the Kansas City Chiefs football movie. I think you did one that was a 90s Christmas.
Yeah, I did one. It's time travel. Yeah. Yeah,
time travel. I'm sure they've done the Groundhog Day one.
Sure.
Would you ever pitch one and maybe you and Vortex Films could get together and pitch this on my behalf, but 2 Star Wars. Oh, I got it. Better yet, a Star Wars fan and a Star Trek fan.
Oh,
and they were enemies since grade school, and now it's Christmas, 20 years later, and they both went on to their respective cons to Star Wars Celebration and Las Vegas Star Trek convention, and now they're back together in their hometown for Christmas, neighbors. And
the tapestry
they battle it out. I don't know. That's where my pitch.
Listen, I think the best thing about these movies, these theme movies, which I think are a blast, is that it taps into a pre-existing fandom. And I think that Hallmark and those types of Christmas movies, and we make original movies and we sell them to Hallmark and things. But I think that those types of that's why we did a 90s Christmas and we got Sixpence None the Richer. We got that song Kiss Me in the movie. Yep. And so there's different nostalgic pieces. And I think what Hallmark does so beautifully and Lifetime and these other networks is that they're already tapping into pre-existing IP and building relationships. And to be honest with you, when I got into making these types of movies, I just made horror and sci-fi. I had never made a romance movie. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago and said, hey, you're going to make a bunch of romance movies, I would say, no, I'm not. What I think got me into it the most is the fans. And I think that that's what I related with the most, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or Hallmark. fans love to be heard and honored. And I think that, sometimes as a geeky nerd, some people kind of look down on that type of content, very much like, Hallmark, where people are like, oh, it's the same plot and all this type of stuff. But those fans are rabid and they're excited about, and if they like your movie, much like, what we're talking about here today, they will make that Christmas movie their whole personality, at least for the season.
Yeah.
They love it when you honor that fandom. And that's how I found my way into this genre. Was I was trying to creatively kind of figure out what I could do with this space. And I went online and I read about all these Christmas movies and TV movies that, people have really, really rallied behind. And now there's Christmas conventions where you can meet the Christmas stars. There's a cruise where you can go on a cruise with a bunch of the stars. There's all these tie-ins where there's wine or there's like embroidery while you're watching the film, and that type of fandom is something I totally understood, and that's why I wanted to give the Hallmark fans or the horror fans, whoever, because I'm a fan myself of different things. But I learned to love the Christmas movies as well. But there's such a big fandom of that. And I think every fan just wants to be heard and validated and respected with whatever it is that they're into. And that's what I really kind of dove into and wanted the movies to feel so authentic to the people who, watch Christmas in July,
Yes.
It's all year round now,
I think, just speaking on fandom in general, I love the respect you seem to have for fandom, because my personal opinion is that whatever you're a fan of is, I don't know how to phrase it, but the idea that fandom is the same, regardless of what you are a fan of.
Of course.
And having that respect, like, because I know a lot of people who will be like, you're a Star Wars fan, whatever, nerd, or you're a Star Trek fan, whatever, nerd. And the simple truth is, like, if you go into a stadium and you watch the fans cheer on a football team or a hockey team, they are in cosplay. Just as if you go to a convention, you may be in cosplay. And so I think there is a universality to fandom in general. And it's great to see you kind of love and respect that, regardless of whether you're a fan of it or not.
Of course, I think that everyone, whether it's commemorative plates or spoons or football or sci-fi, like, everybody's into something. You know
or
what I
3
mean?
3/4-inch action figures by
Of course, everyone is into
a pile of deconstructed lightsabers on my
there,
desk.
there you go.
Not even
it's
good.
everything. And my wife was born in Romania and came over when she was 12. And so she didn't have a lot, to be honest with you, didn't watch Star Wars until we were together. But it was such a great experience watching all the movies in sequence and television shows with her. And she says the same look is on my face that she assumes that was there when I was 7. I get excited. I see the THX logo, and I get, oh man, it's happening. And she goes, like, she's gotten way more into it over the years, of course. But what she loves about it is that she goes, I turn on, like, I get excited, and I'm a big Planet of the Apes fan and stuff as well, the original movies. And it's the same type of thing happens where I've seen all the movies, and, even the movie theater around my house, they played the original trilogy. They played Planet of the Apes. We still go and just pay $5 to see it in theaters. We own the Blu-ray, the DVD, the VHS, the special edition. Doesn't matter. I want to go see it in theaters. It's $5, So I think that type of fandom, I think everybody has it to some degree. And I think it's so special. There's obviously going to be things that are for some people and not for others. And, but I think it's great to just honor that fandom and whatever that fandom may be.
Yeah. What I love about what we're doing on our show is, like, trying to take the hate out of the debate that's, like, I think especially prevalent in a lot of the Star Wars fandom, or a portion of. And I love your perspective.
I can't understand it. I remember being a kid being like, I would cut off my left arm for a 1-hour Star Wars special. And now we get, like, new Star Wars stuff like every 7 months. And it's so polarized. I have no idea why. Yeah. And listen, some things are more for me than other things. I totally get that. Not that I've watched everything there is, but I think some are more for me, and some are for maybe a new audience of Star Wars, which is just as great. That's even better. It's keeping everybody engaged, whether you're an old fan or a new fan, you know. And I think that there's such a range of content nowadays, from video games to animation to live action to TV to movies to theatrical experiences to you know, holiday specials, whatever it is. There's something for everybody, you know.
Yeah, no, and to protect the integrity of that audience and that fandom, no matter what it is, and no matter, you know, what others might think of it. Like, people, I think especially with, I don't want to get too far off track because you want to ask about your Star Wars journey. But we haven't even touched Star Wars really yet, 100%. But I love what you're saying, because I feel like I get into a lot of the, you know, Hallmark, as you kind of self-described, like more predictable ending, like holiday films around that time, because they give you the warm and the fuzzies. Like, the world is so dark right now, and like people want happy stories to root for, and they want to connect with that. And so I just love I don't know, I have nothing else to say other than I love the respect that you have for that audience.
I think that's great. Thank you.
But pivoting, because I do want to ask about your Star Wars journey. What was your first introduction to Star Wars, and can you walk us through that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's as far back as I remember. My dad saw the, you know, original trilogy when he was in, you know, as a child, and watched them as a teenager and things like that. And we had them on home video. You know, I was born in 87, and I had them all the VHS tapes growing up. I actually wore out 2 of them, Empire and Jedi. We had to get new VHS tapes. They didn't work anymore after how many times I watched them. But it came at such an amazing age. You know, I was, you know, into a few, you know, animated movies, you know, but I really kind of latched on to, you know, movies like The Goonies and Neverending Story and those types of films, those types of adventure, you know, somewhat coming of age, universal stories at a very, you know, young age. And I was hooked moment one. You know, I saw those movies. I don't think I understood the impact it had when I watched them when I was a kid. It was just about as many action figures and as many things as I could get my hands on, and I still have all the toys and stuff when I was a child. And you know, every year at Christmas there was more Star Wars action figures under the Christmas tree. But it had a profound effect on me as an artist, you know, and I think it was planting that seed very early on, you know, watching those films again and again, it subconsciously working my way into my mind and made me want to be a filmmaker myself, because I loved the grandness of it. I loved the escaping of it. You know, we would go and we'd watch Star Wars and then go in the backyard and recreate Star Wars in some sort of way, you know, when it snowed and we get a lot of snow in Canada, you know, every backyard was some sort of form of the Hoth rebel base in building snow, whatever. And, you know, it came at such a young age, and I've never given up on that. You know, I still rewatch the films and, you know, get excited. You know, we got really into Andor and then watched Rogue One and Star Wars as a piece, you know, A New Hope. But it came at such a young age. As far back as I can remember, Star Wars has been, you know, a major part of my life in every aspect. And I think it's just such old stories. My dad would show me these, you know, old black and white Westerns, and really, you know, a lot of it comes from those types of good, evil, the good guys wearing white, the bad guys wearing black. You know, it's right there. It's right there. Luke Skywalker's wearing white. Darth Vader's wearing black. It's the old cowboys, good versus evil, you know, and, you know, David versus Goliath, one man can make a difference, you know, and I think that those stories are so universal, which is why probably it had such an impact, not just visually, how people had never seen anything like that before, especially when it came out, but, you know, just the legacy of, you know, all these characters in this universe that have continued. So as far back as I can remember, if I have whatever memory I have as the earliest child, Star Wars is a massive.
It's involved. I love that.
What was your first in-theater experience with Star Wars? Was it the special editions? Was it some form of the original releases, or was it Phantom Menace? Or
it was the re-releases of the original trilogy. I saw them at a second run theater. This was before, obviously, you could book tickets online. I do remember my dad and I taking a folding chair and you know, camping out in front of the theater at a very young age to see
the original blockbuster,
the A New Hope when it was re-released. You know, with the new little bits, little first look at Jabba the Hutt there is the new looks and stuff. And I'd seen the movie 40 times before seeing it in theaters. But I just remember when that THX logo came on, like the whole theater was like vibrating. It was like everyone was seeing it for the first time, not the 51st time, and it was a very electric experience. I remember being, very young, but remember, and then when the pan down, everyone was just silent. It was just like you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was just in it, sold out. And it was like an 11 a.m. screening. Like this wasn't at like 8 p.m. This was 400 people having a shared experience before noon, and so we saw them all like that. They all were kind of re-released within months of each other. And so my dad and I saw them all across the board. So
now it sounds like your dad is a big movie fan. And you also mentioned being a fan of Planet of the Apes. Did your dad get you into movies?
Yeah, Planet of the Apes. I get my music side from my mother and my movie side from my father. And my dad he retired now, but it was a homicide detective. So,
wow.
very, very serious business, and I just play in a land of make believe with like Christmas trees now, you know what I mean? So, he would show me these incredible films, when I was a child, maybe some, I remember seeing like Saving Private Ryan in theaters when I was like 11, maybe some questioning about, checking the ratings of some of these movies.
But that's a real 80s parent. Like, I was dragged to things like Reds, Police Academy.
Yeah.
90s parents too. My parents were doing the same thing. Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. I saw, Friday the 13th and all those, movies, at a very, young age, and, but yeah, my grandfather took my dad to see the original Planet of the Apes at this small movie theater in Montreal, when those movies first came out. And, I actually tracked down the original lobby cards from Planet of the Apes from that theater, that my dad would see, and I have them framed upstairs. And so like that type of, my dad and I still see the new Planet of the Apes movies together, though I'm a big fan of people in monkey suits versus CGI. But yeah, I saw all those films with my dad, whether it was Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, he took me to see The Matrix. I remember when it was new, and just showing me these old, in Canada, we used to have a station called City TV, and they used to play, movies. We still have City TV, but it's not the same as it was in the 90s. But they used to have an Apes marathon all night long, and that was the one night of the year I had no bedtime. Whatever I fell asleep watching, which would often be the 15 minutes into the third one, 11-year-old's going to make it till 6 a.m. And that's why I think they said, stay up as late as you want, because we know you're not going to make it past this, So those were always really special moments because not that at the time, I'm sure I didn't appreciate it for what it was, but it was great bonding, and they were just incredible films that I think still, Planet of the Apes still has probably one of the best endings, in any movie, and just, experiencing those movies for the first time on some ratty VHS that I'm sure we bought at some flea market, has been a great joy, looking back on, for sure.
Now, did he take you to the prequel trilogies? Did you go?
Yeah, we saw Phantom Menace for sure together. I worked at a movie theater when Attack of the Clones came out, so I think I saw that every other day. When that was in theaters, because they had screenings that started at midnight, and so you would just end your shift and you go catch the last half an hour, or I've probably seen that the most just because I worked there, and then we saw Revenge of the Sith together as well on its last run. So yeah,
that's awesome. So what elements of the movies do you feel like really resonated with you the most? I mean, was it kind of more like the action and special effects? Did you kind of get into storytelling? Was it the archetypes?
Yeah,
what was it for you?
I think it's Star Wars is such a perfect storm that it does have all those elements, as well as, a deep rooted family drama, as well at its core, but I just think the world was so fantastical. Like, I think that each planet felt so thought of, and there was such a vision for not just such a linear story where characters go to A to B, but they go to A to B to C and back to D and over here, and I think it was the ragtag team of heroes. I think for me, the misfits kind of finding themselves in the way and proving that those misfits had value, even though I think some characters, had already written themselves off, I think, in the series, and I think that type of mentality rang true. I wasn't always the most, popular kid, but I had a very good core group of friends who also fellow misfits. And, growing up, and still to this day, I watch it every Christmas. I love Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the original claymation. And I love it when they go to the island of misfit toys and they meet all the toys that, kids don't want or like, or, trains with square wheels and water pistols that shoot jelly. And I just love that mentality that a group of misfits can make a difference. And I think that when you look at, Han Solo and Chewbacca and those types of, and even Luke Skywalker, I think he was, yearning to not be a misfit, and I think that, all these different characters were not only misfits in their own eyes and maybe to their respective worlds and universes, but when they came together is where they found their power. And I think that, with Rudolph, it was all these toys that were on an island, and then Santa came with Rudolph and kind of said, you guys all have like a purpose and matter. And I think that at the core of all of Star Wars, I think it's a lot of people who feel that the universe, they're just a small speck and that they can't make a difference. And I think that, when you look at not only the original trilogy, but the prequel trilogy and, even shows like Andor or Ahsoka, it's usually about people who are, a one-man band who are often feel like they have to just roam the desert planets by themselves in solitude, but really they all work better as a team and they all sort of fight it because they've written themselves off because they have this sin from the past that they feel that they can't move on from, but they all do, and they do it as a team. And I think that resonated so early on with me. And I think that though I didn't maybe understand all of it, I think that type of camaraderie and community within the Star Wars space, not just the fandom of the community, but really within the stories, it's all about helping each other. And by helping other people, you are in fact helping yourself. And I think that there's so many of those different characters and probably all the main characters have that, and I think that the funniest is C-3PO and R2-D2, who inherently are just bouncing around and always kind of just going along with it. And I think that, but they're always finding these little pockets of people who are misguided, and they, whether or not they're speaking English or beeps and bops, they're still contributing to giving the characters around them the support that they need, or, being integral to the plans. That sense of community always flabbergasted me to an amazing degree, because not all those people are even human, some are aliens and some look different and some are weird creatures, and yet they all have the same purpose, and it's to help each other. And by helping other people, they've all helped themselves in some sort of capacity as well.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, like, if everything on Scarif would have been for nothing if it hadn't been for R2-D2, and I think that's true.
I know, it's crazy. It's just these little things that have all kind of come together. And, I think, Rogue One is a fantastic example of a band of misfits who, for the most part, don't even trust each other, throughout that journey. But not only are they trusting each other and getting over their own personal hurdles, is that they're showing that other people, if you do band together, you can in fact make a difference. One person can make a difference. And I think that, Andor and Rogue One had really highlighted that, even maybe more so than some of the original trilogy stories.
Right.
Now, your IMDb says you're the SVP of production for Vortex Films. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
No, of course.
So I'm wondering, with everything you just said about the characters, and especially how R2-D2 and C-3PO just seems to be bopping along, do you ever take your kind of knowledge, interest in Star Wars as inspiration for stories you're telling, for whether it's Hallmark Channel or Lifetime or Sci-Fi Channel or any other stuff? Like, is there a transposition of inspiration from Star Wars into your own work at all?
I would say all the time, almost everything that we've done. And it could come down to what we were talking about before with, Luke wearing white and Darth Vader wearing black. I think that, trying to figure out in each character, in each scenario, what feels authentic to that character and really kind of paint a world. Whether it's, a more traditional kind of Hallmark movie, if she's starting at the beginning of the movie, she's probably not Christmas enthused. Right. So we're going to probably put her in darker colors because we want the red dress at the end to really pay off. Right.
Yes.
So we want to start her in kind of a more moodier place, and we want to be authentic to her and have her put on the big gown at the end of the movie. I think that what Star Wars does so beautifully is that since there's so many worlds, there's so many different things to explore. And whether it's Christmas or a horror film or any kind of that, it's about telling that story authentically. And I think that what George Lucas did was, he told it authentically, especially with, his original trilogy and prequel trilogy, because he was really at the helm of that. And some of it's just trusting your gut. I'm sure he had a lot of pushback at different things, even probably within his own mind, about struggling with that. But finding that, and I think through this journey and through, watching Star Wars, and big Marvel fan as well, not just the comic books, but the movies, that my wife and I wrote a comic book, and it's called Dr. Awesome Woman, and it takes place in space, and it's kind of Power Rangers and
fun.
And Star Wars. We wrote it together during the pandemic, and we had our first issue just come out in May. And it takes place on different worlds with different costumes, with different alien villains. And some aliens are good and some aliens are bad, and they have spaceships. And a lot of those designs, we went back to original Star Wars drawings or some of the movies to say, inspired by, this TIE fighter, but not this TIE fighter, but inspired by. And so we were able to kind of pull a lot of references from Star Wars for different looks and different characters and poses and things like that. And I have a bunch of Star Wars comics. You can see just the tip up here. Yeah. And trying to get into that lore of it by saying they go to this planet, it looks like this. And, the first planet they fight on is in our comic book is inspired by Tatooine and had sand dunes and those types of things. And so I'm always kind of pulling these, and whether it's not just Star Wars or Planet of the Apes, which is also a desolate wasteland of a planet for the original anyways, but always pulling those influences and always trying to honoring that type of the story and kind of legacy that came before, because I think David Lynch said it has all been said before, but it hasn't been said by you. And I think that that type of mentality where we can use inspiration and kind of share a new story is a really powerful tool.
So then Lucasfilm hands you the reins.
Yeah, wow.
To do a one-off. What's the story you tell? What is it?
Well, that's crazy. There's 101. I'm sure I could tell.
Oh, sure.
I would love to do a horror movie on Hoth. I think. That was because I think horror movies that take place during winter are already underutilized, and I think that winter is already an element that is scary. Snowstorms and these increasingly big snowstorms and things like that happen. But I think there's such a lore. We haven't kind of really gone back to Hoth in kind of the main kind of movies and things. We've gone back to Tatooine and Naboo and all these other places, but we haven't really gone back to Hoth. And I think the idea of this, the Wampas and things like that in Hoth, I think I was a big Shadow of the Empire fan, and I love the levels where you could kind of play Dash Rendar and run around Hoth. So I would do a horror movie at Hoth for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome.
The best part is it's they sound the same. Horror on Hoth.
Yeah, exactly. And
I would watch that.
We got to give Lucasfilms a call.
Well, they tune in exclusively to our show.
There you go.
So, what would you like to see in the future of Star Wars?
I think for me, the future of Star Wars, I think I would love to see more so than a show or an episode. I'd love to see like the return to like unity within the fan base. I think that we're a very divided fan base.
Yeah,
we're very loud. Yeah. We're a very loud fan base. But I think we're a very divided fan base. I'm not a big Trekkie guy, though I've seen some stuff, they seem to be a very unified group, with Star Trek Discovery and all those CBS shows. But I would love to see more unity. I hate, to put it bluntly, is that I hate when people go on and like trash shows that haven't come out yet, or sync IMDb ratings or Rotten Tomato scores to, I don't know, make a political point or just be a jerk. I have no idea, but it's the unity that I first fell in love with Star Wars, is that, when I was a kid and, taking my action figures to school, I would find other kids that also took their action figures to school. And it was such a bonding experience, when I was a kid, and, comic books and Star Wars weren't as cool then as they are now. And not that many people were walking around with, Iron Man shirts, when I was a kid. And so I would love to see the return to unity of that, and saying that Star Wars is for everybody. Some Star Wars is more for this demographic than that. But there's room for everybody in Star Wars, whether it doesn't matter the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or who you voted for. It's really just about these stories in space. And, some is for you, but you have to acknowledge that some is maybe not directly for you. And I think that that's kind of what we've gotten away from as Star Wars fans, because there used to be 3 movies, they were gospel, and everybody rallied behind. And as those were kind of expanded, other voices, not just George Lucas's, but other voices kind of emerged from that space. And I think some people have done a fantastic job in honoring some of those. I think some people have done the best that they had with the tools that they were given. And I think some people were I just want to tell a totally different story that may not be for everybody, but some people really, really like those too. And so I think it's going back to, if you don't really have anything nice to say, then maybe just keep it to yourself a little bit and go home and watch Empire Strikes Back again for 100 times. That's great too, So that's what I would love to see with the fan base, because I think we're so divided, but we're always so vocal about what we don't like. And I think there was a period of time where anyone would have done anything for just a little bit more Star Wars. And now we get Star Wars all the time. We're spoiled Star Wars fans. We get stuff all the time. We get it with cool actors. We get animation crossovers. We get all these cool stuff. And it doesn't seem like there's ever enough. You know what I mean? We get more and more. But I would love to say, Star Wars fans, there's no more fighting. Let's put the lightsabers down and just say we're in it together, and some things are for you and some things are for a 9-year-old kid, and that's so similar to so many other genres and so many other topics. Some things are for adults and some things are for kids and some things are not for you at all.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that back around, because you had touched on it earlier in our conversation, and I kind of wanted to bring it back because I'm curious. Yes, agree. Start there.
You're like, I disagree. I want more arguments about.
No, let's.
People don't hate on Acolyte enough.
I'm curious, from your producer perspective, what do you think that Star Wars is doing correct right now in terms of in the streaming era, and where do you think it's struggling a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. What I think they're doing right is that they're exploring the space. Mm-hmm. I think that they're trying new things, and I am a big believer in everything you try doesn't have to necessarily work out, but I love that they're trying for it to be for everybody. And I think that there's shows that really hooked me in as a show. I was obsessed with Andor. It was the month that it came out, it was my whole personality. I think what they did and mirrored a lot of real political times, but it kind of made it accessible in that sense as well. I think they're taking some risks. I think when you have, and not all, in my opinion, those risks have not all paid off. But I do think it's cool that as a studio they're making stuff that is animation to live action, from movies to television shows, from comic books to lunchboxes. They're still all exploring that space as much as they can, whether that's bringing back old fans or bringing back old characters for the fans, or creating brand new characters that we've never seen on film before. I think where that sometimes can go off the rails is that when you're trying to appease everybody, I feel like sometimes you appease nobody. You know what I mean? And I think that if you're going to make a wide range of shows and stories, and some have 6 episodes and we'll never hear from these characters again, maybe, and some are a bigger story, a bigger arcing story. I think it's the same thing that the MCU sort of suffers from now, is that the drive is to say, let's get something out there for everybody, which I don't disagree with the model, but I feel like sometimes those fans, maybe sometimes do feel a little forgotten and feel a little unheard. And as we talked about earlier, most fans just want to be heard, and not saying do everything that the fans want. I see the message boards. How come we're not doing this or going? Yeah. Because that's not fun either, it's like knowing what you're getting for Christmas. It's like, it kind of ruins your eyes about it a little bit, right? But I do think they could do sometimes a better job of maybe some honoring some more of the legacy fans a bit. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a darker, grittier Star Wars. I don't even want to see Christopher Nolan Star Wars. I don't know what that would look like,
I just want to see horror on Hoth.
I just want to see horror on Hoth. You know what I mean? But I think that the trying to remember what I think. That there's so many different fans, and some of the fans are older because we've been around since the original movies came out, and some are brand new, experiencing it for the first time. But I do feel like the experiencing it for the first time in the recent years are getting the majority of the attention versus the Star Wars fans who have been around and have bought in comic books and action figures, and though we're not always tuning in maybe or rushing to the theater to see the new thing, just to honor that we've been around for a while, and it would be nice to have some more content directed at us, which is what I thought Andor did so beautifully, is because I felt very heard, even though there was no lightsabers in the whole show, which tends to be my favorite thing, but I do think it was great how I did feel heard as a fan, and I thought they handled the writing and crafted that show. I think it's one of the best shows, not just in Star Wars, but I think it was one of the best shows of the last 10 years. I thought they just did a phenomenal
And I think it's going to be super snubbed at the Emmys, and I'm very nervous. I
think it's going to get super snubbed because they're going to put it in that Star Wars box and then just move on. But I think that if that wasn't a Star Wars show, if that was just like an original show and it told those political stories, people would be like praising it up there with The Handmaid's Tale. But because it got kind of put in that Star Wars sci-fi box, but I think that's why I was so happy that they didn't really include stuff with like the Force and lightsabers and those things. They kept it very grounded, and didn't need a bunch of cameos and things to kind of tell that story. They just kind of told that story.
Well, they demonstrated that the revolution needed both.
Of course.
And that's what was so brilliant about it. And I'm with you. I'm pre-angry with the Emmys and the nominations.
I'm already upset. It hasn't even happened. I'm already upset
and it's not even announced.
Yeah. Of course.
Talking about all these, about creating fans, because you had mentioned new fans. And earlier you had mentioned your wife had never seen them until she met you. How did you introduce the films to her? In what was there a particular order or strategy? And also, how did she react upon first seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have this conversation with all my friends who are having kids, and the kids are 5-6 years old, and they're like, I don't know. I want to show my kids, but if they don't like it or if they hate it, I don't know. I don't know what to do. So people have held off. One of my best friends started to show his kids Star Wars, and at the beginning they're like, I don't get it. And they're like, we're turning it off and we're trying again in 3 years.
This is too important.
We need to like this, so we need to start again. So I think what we did was, during the pandemic, during I think it was a Christmas break where we weren't allowed to her family lives in Edmonton, and so it's quite the distance from Toronto, so we weren't able to travel and do that stuff during the pandemic. So we try to plan these kind of, especially during the pandemic where you couldn't do much, so we did plan like movie nights and things like that. So we watched the original trilogy, and then the prequel trilogy, and then the new trilogy. We did watch the holiday special in that as well, which may have been a mistake looking back. I lost points for that, but gained them back with other movies.
Where in order was the holiday special? Like, did you watch the original trilogy and then holiday special?
We watched the original trilogy and then the prequel trilogy, and then I said, I have something fun. I guess was a lie in her eyes. I did not have something fun. I had 90 minutes she could never get back. But she did watch it and has vowed to never watch it again because she has seen it. So that was a one and done. But it was a great experience. I think specifically watching, the older ones, and I think to somewhat the prequel ones as well. I think that she, really got into the story, and in the newer trilogies, I have a complicated love relationship with the newer ones as well. But I think rewatching the old ones, and I think even the prequel ones, it was a real thrill, because half the time I was just pausing it, being like, okay, this guy is going to do this, and it's very, very important. And even though he's on screen for like 11 seconds, he's very important 40 years from now. So it was like those types of things. Those types of things were super fun. And we have two Christmas trees. We have a more traditional, Christmas tree in our living room, and in our kind of like, third floor, it's all comic books and Star Wars and action figures type of trees. And so, she was like, oh, I recognize that guy. He's on our Christmas tree, and we have a Yoda topper. We got a Yoda at the top as our angel. So it was like seeing some people that she'd seen on our Christmas tree, but, kind of knew who they were, but now kind of experiencing it. So it was a blast. I found myself watching her sometimes more than the movie, just to kind of see her face on how she reacted to some of those, kind of twists and some of those characters and things like that. So, and now we've watched, all the Mandalorian and all the Star Wars shows, since together, and some of them at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and experiencing that together. So it's been a real joy. Anytime there's a new Marvel or a new Star Wars thing, we kind of watch it together. And, sometimes there's hey, what's this guy? And I get to break into my spiel about why this guy or girl is so important in the legacy of that. So it's been real fun, because she's been real into it as well, which is, it's exciting,
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. And I think I think there's something so amazing watching something that you like with someone who's seen it for the first time and they're appreciating and enjoying it, and you almost get to see it again for the first time through their eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I sit there and I'm like, are you enjoying it?
I know. Are you liking it? Are you liking it?
Did you see the thing that just happened there?
Yeah.
Really, that was cool, right?
And I'm pointing out like this, we're watching the, updated original trilogy, and, this shot wasn't in the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
This special effect is new. And, those types of things. It's really exciting. She's an actress as well. She does a lot of the Hallmark Christmas movies, and did the television show Rain, and, those types of on CW. And so, it's interesting for her as well, because not just as a fan, but as a person who makes movies and things like that as well. So there's so many things that that she kind of sees now. And when Luke Skywalker showed up on The Mandalorian, to me it was like, and I didn't know, we were watching at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was like the second coming of Christ. I jumped out of my chair. It was like the rapture. I could not believe it. And, and we just a year prior, we watched all the movies, and I have countless Luke Skywalker, everything. And when he returned, holy moly, it was incredible. I was like crying. It was like amazing. And she really understood, just because of now all the things that we've watched together. So it was just a tremendous, moment together. So, and even when we went to Romania, we went to this castle that was kind of close to where she grew up, and they had all these swords that you could hold and play with, and we replicated that New Hope poster behind you, with me holding the sword up. And she was, so we did that on top of this mountain in Romania. That pose, So it's been a lot of fun sharing that with someone who didn't, she was aware of Star Wars, but she didn't experience it as a kid. And so it's fun being a big kid with her now.
I love that. I love your love of fandom and fans and Star Wars. And I have a question that's deeply selfish.
Yeah.
Lucasfilm calls you up. You're making the Hoth horror film.
Yeah.
Can I be in it? I don't care 100%. If I'm the first person killed. I'm the random worker stabbed to death first.
You're gonna be the Wampa.
10 seconds in. But
You're in. I think that's I think that out of I have a complicated relationship. I would say with the newer films, some things I think really worked. Other things, maybe not for me. But what I loved about those types of movies was like, whether it was Daniel Craig or Kevin Smith, or like everyone was just like, can I just put on a stormtrooper helmet? Can I just be in the background? Something I can do to do that. And I think that was so amazing, is that all those fans grew up to be filmmakers or actors or performers or whoever. And all those filmmakers, whether it was J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson or, all those people were just like, yeah, let's come and play, come and do the thing and let's be in it. And, and hearing all the stories after the fact of, who kept Kevin Smith doing voice or putting on this or Craig doing that, it was just about like, how many friends can I just like, without taking away from the story and saying Daniel Craig, Stormtrooper, but just come and cameo, be in the Hoth horror movie and be killed by a Wampa, do whatever. I think that type of fun is so crucial to the existence of our fan base. Is that I would say Lucasfilms calls and says, listen, you can't do the Hoth horror movie, but you can be a stormtrooper in Ahsoka season 2. I'm in. I'll pay for my own flight.
I'll build my own costume. Yeah,
whatever. I'm in. Let me paint the sets. I'll do whatever. I got to go to Industrial Light and Magic when I was I think I was 18 or 19.
Amazing.
I was doing a motivational tour that I was a technical director on, and we were doing it down the coast, the Oregon coast, and we had some clips that we were playing in this motivational tour, and some were provided by Lucasfilms. And so they asked if we would like a tour of the space while we were in San Francisco. And so going through it, I missed George Lucas by 4 minutes. His coffee was still on his desk. There was still steam coming off his coffee. I missed him by 4 minutes, but they did let me sit in his office chair. But he was still there at the time, and so I walked.
Was it still warm? Did you get
still warm? There was still things on it.
It wasn't your time yet. It's still coming.
It wasn't my time. What I thought was so cool there, though, is once the films are edited and the films are complete, they close that editing bay forever. And so everything is just touched and left. So all three of the original movies, they've replaced the door with a glass window. And once the film is complete and picture locked, that door is sealed, and the editing room becomes a semi-tomb that you can kind of look in. It's almost like going to a museum and seeing like the velvet rope and like kind of like sticking your head in. So I got to see all those spaces and all where the films were cut, and no other film has ever been cut in that room since. It was just kind of sealed off after those movies were complete. And so it was so cool to see that even when you're making something at the time, you never really know the cultural impact or how fans will react. But even then, they knew that this is important history, and we're gonna close the door on that. So I saw the real R2-D2. They took me to this like props area, and I remember talking to the tour guide who was so polite to indulge me. And I said, I looked at her and I said, I think we're at this big props room, and it's just bins of helmets and blasters and, just like, but you'd see it at Costco.
Yeah.
Like you were just buying a bag of oranges. They were just stormtrooper helmets and all this stuff. And I look at her and I said, I've been well behaved on this tour. And she was like, yeah, of course. Why? And I was like, and this is the last stop of the tour, right? And I go, yeah. And I go, awesome. And I just ran around and put on anything that I could and held anything that they'd let me, and just like grabbing things from bins. And I was like, I already went on the tour. What are you going to do? Kick me out now? I just want to get the stormtrooper helmet on, and I want to pick up this random piece of whatever. And just touch everything I could while I was there, and it was just so incredible to kind of be there. And, legacy, I see all the directors and they stand in the lobby next to the big Darth Vader. And I have my picture there in the lobby next to Darth Vader and stuff like that. And so it's just an incredible space. And when I was a teenager, I'll tell you, that was the big thing. That was amazing.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's like being in the land itself.
I know. It was as close as I'll ever get to a galaxy far, far away,
You may still get closer with horror on Hoth.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We're going to make it happen.
The hell out of that on social and see if we can get some attention. Yeah.
Now, our final question for you, we've talked a lot about your Star Wars journey, about how it always was just around you ever since you were a kid. It was always there. The kind of like bonding you had with your dad over it and films in general, which is really, I think, so special. Wearing out Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi on VHS, which I think shows just how much you watched it as a kid. Spending every other night watching the end of Attack of the Clones. This idea that it's a group of misfits that kind of reflected your own feelings of is it misfithood?
Yeah.
It's talking about all this, and then of course how it inspired you in your life, not just your life, but your career.
Yeah.
In movie making. Having gone through all this in the past hour, can you kind of say what does Star Wars mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's really the land of kind of endless possibilities. I think that has been true, whether it's, the original trilogy or more modern shows, is that, everybody's voice is valid. Everybody's story seems like an adventure. And I think that, what was so interesting about the original trilogy is that you get, a guy and he's working on a farm and he feels like he's so removed. And I think that is sometimes, such a universal feeling where you feel like life's kind of just passing you by. But we just thought, oh, it's Luke Skywalker and it's his adventure, and because he's part of something greater. And I think that whether it's Luke Skywalker or Ahsoka or Cassian Andor, I think that universal feeling of where do I belong, I think is such a universal feeling, not just in the Star Wars universe, but in life. And we talked about it. It's darker times. There's so much unrest in the world. And I think often you question, how do I fit into this? How do I fit into this larger tapestry? And, where is my place? And some people are comfortably at their place, and I think other people are consistently yearning for what that may be. And I think when Luke Skywalker is looking at those, two sons and kind of asking himself, what is next for me? I think that probably every person somewhere in their life has probably been at that moment and said, where do I belong? And I think that is always what Star Wars meant to me, whether you're human or alien, whether you're male or female, whether you're a robot, AI looking for purpose, and I think that so many of those characters deal with that sense of purpose, whether that's trying to figure out what your purpose is or fulfilling your purpose, or, always being open to when your purpose reveals itself, and I think that so many people, do struggle with that. I think, through the darker times that we have now, or through COVID, or even just a minor thing in someone's life. I think that, that question of what about me, not selfishly, but profoundly, what about me? And I think that, Star Wars has always meant that to me. And, because there's so many different characters in that story that consistently ask themselves that. And sometimes in the original trilogy, we see Obi-Wan and we see, wow, he's so wise, so put together, and then you find out his history and you say, wow, he's had so many moments of why is it going this way, and what is my purpose? And I thought my purpose was this, but now my purpose could be this, and and had trials and tribulations, and had to put himself in exile and had to go through those things. So even the characters that we think are polished had those moments of doubt and had those moments of clarity and had those moments of, but why me? And that's what it's always meant to me is trying to not only find the answer to that question, but be open to hearing the answer when it does reveal itself, you know.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I love that. I love
Thank
it.
you.
It's
Thank you.
what I really like. We play with this idea of a certain point of view on the show because the idea of the fandom is from a certain point of view. And I had never, until you talked about that, I had never really thought about it in those terms as a thematic that echoes throughout this franchise, because Rey says one of my favorite lines in, I think it's The Last Jedi, I need someone to show me where I fit into all of this, or where I belong. And then Luke definitely was like looking at those twin sons going, hey, where do I belong? Is it out there somewhere? And as you were talking, I was thinking about the prequel trilogy, and Anakin spends that time saying, where do I belong on the Jedi Council? Do I belong at the side of Palpatine? What is my role here? And I just think whenever I hear a point of view that like opens up my eyes, I'm always appreciative.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Oh, of course. I think in all of the Star Wars shows and movies, that theme has always, and it's not always the forefront of the story they're trying to tell. But those scenes, whether it's with Kylo Ren, or where does he belong, and how does he honor what his family struggles and dynamics and mistakes that he has made that we see both on and off camera. I think those themes have always been like really ingrained in Star Wars, in the storytelling of, misfits and purpose and being open to the universe showing you the way and sometimes showing you two different paths and, relying on you to pick the right one. So
this is the way.
This is the way.
Yeah. So, Christopher, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Christopher_Giroux and on Facebook and all the social media things, X and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And I'm very active on social, so I'm around.
Well, we'll have all those links in the show notes so people can just pop down there and click right to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
It was a wonderful conversation. Christopher, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with both of you.